Welcome back to the Health Rebels podcast. Today, oh man, I got an axe to grind. I got to grind my gears. There is something that I absolutely hate with a lot of fitness inspiration. There's a lot of stuff out there trying to make inspirational posts, and they fall into this common cliche that just disgusts me. It absolutely pulls away from the real purpose between health and wellness, and it shames and actually pushes people further away. One of the biggest challenges that we have in the fitness industry as coaches, as coach like myself, is sometimes good intentions with bad outcomes. We see this a lot in diet culture, right? There's a lot of good intentions with encouraging people to eat better foods, but we end up making a bunch of fear. We end up causing a lot of fear around food and insecurities and self-doubt and confusion. And now people just hate the concept of healthy eating, right? Because we've created a lot of mishaps around that. And we do the same thing with motivation and inspiration. One of my favorite quotes about motivation, I believe it came from Inky Johnson, but he says that people don't need to be motivated. They just need to be reminded of what's important. And this is something that fitness inspiration posts always miss, because they kind of create this elite mentality and this egotistical approach to fitness that really, unless you're one of those 3% of people that are doing really well with athletic-based fitness, it just doesn't make sense for you. That's not what people are going to health and wellness for. So let me give you an example. I originally came up with this when I was out on a hike. And I was out on it ended up being about 11 and a half miles with some big hill climbs. It's a fairly challenging hike. Now, if you know my background, if you know my story, you know that I have a steel rod in my left knee. I've got a steel rod, 3 pins, 5 screws. I spent 4 months on bed rest. I have no cartilage in my knee. I've got a quarter of a meniscus. Like, the knee should not be able to do an 11-mile hike, right? I should not be physically able to do that without excruciating amounts of pain. And you know what that means? You've heard fitness inspiration in the past. If I can do it, you can finish the expression, right? If I can do it, that means that I can do it. It says absolutely nothing about you. You know, the hikes are something that I do for my personal enjoyment. It's something that I wanted to do. When we look at someone in a certain position, we forget to acknowledge their story. And when we use them as another standard, as the standard that we have to live up to, it ignores your story. It invalidates you. It doesn't allow you to be an individual, right? There's a really common example. You've probably seen this go along social media at some point, but there is a guy that does Spartan races, those mud runs, those obstacle courses, those hard races, and he's got no legs. He's a double amputee from the waist down, and the tagline that always comes up, they always show a picture of him in the mud, climbing the rope, and it says, if he can do it, what's your excuse? I hate that. I hate that so much. Let me tell you why he can do it. Because he wants to. Because it's relevant to him. Because he trained for that. Because he worked for that. He made that aspiration and he worked towards it. Now, I threw out the word aspiration. When we look at these stories of people defying the odds, beating the odds, and doing something extraordinary, it's okay to use that as inspiration. It's okay to use that as an aspiration. When we look at that inspirational stuff, it's okay if you can use it to discover standards that you might want to play around with, right? When I say that I have a knee injury and now I can do an 11-mile hike, maybe you think, hey, I've had knee pains in the past and I'd like to be able to hike 10 miles. Maybe that's something that I should work towards. But maybe you hear the story about me hiking and go, wow, that sounds boring. Why would you want to spend 4 hours walking in the woods by yourself? That's lame. That's fine. You don't have to adopt other people's standards. Another common example of the Fitspo gone wrong, and this one got a lot of backlash, a lot of negativity a couple years ago, but it was the mom, the mother of four, posing with her six-pack abs, right? Her kids and her abs. I think it was like 4 or 5 months after her newest baby was born, and she had abs again. And people made the thing, if she could do it, why can't you? And I believe she even made comments like that, which caused some of the backlash because it was shaming mothers for not being more fit, for not being athletes. And I think that's bogus and bullshit. You shouldn't adopt other people's standards. Fitspo often gets in a really unproductive space, in a really counterproductive space, where it does kind of serve as creating artificial standards, right? A lot of people will share Fitspo stuff as a form of virtue signaling, as a way, almost as a masturbatory practice to stroke their own ego, excuse the pun, to kind of show how great they are to their friends and family by sharing this Fitspo stuff with them, the fitness inspiration stuff. It's a way of them to show their standards and to vault themselves, but it doesn't have to create your standard, right? The reason why it creates their standards is because it's something they're interested in. It sets something that they aspire to, that they look forward to. And if you look at pictures of people with abs and you want to work towards having abs, it's not bad, but that's a standard that you have to come up to. The biggest issue with fitness inspiration posts is they artificially put another standard on you that you're forced to try to live up to, whether or not it means anything to you. Now, a little background on the hiking. When I was on bed rest and struggling, when I first came out of bed rest, I struggled to walk up 3 stairs, not 3 flights of stairs, but 3 stairs. I struggled to get onto the front porch of the house. And I remembered growing up as a cross-country runner, I remembered all the hikes, all the endurance stuff that I've done in the past, and I realized that I was losing a part of my identity, right? So being able to walk further and further was personally relevant, personally important to me, and so I worked at it. First, I had to get to the point where I could walk a half a mile without stopping. I remember there was an elementary school next to my house, and going around was somewhere between a quarter mile and a half mile. And it was exhausting initially. And then I remember getting my first 3-mile walk. And boy, I remember about 2/3 of the way through, maybe 2 miles in, I wanted to stop. I wish I could, but I was stuck on this loop. I had to sit down and take a break. And I hated that I was on a 3-mile walk. And over time, I just kept pushing that limit, and I worked towards being able to do the 11-mile hike. I've done a couple 20-mile hikes, but it's only because it was personally relevant to me. It meant something. It was me reclaiming my identity. When you look at someone with six-pack abs are relevant to them. That's why they got it. If you want that and you want to work towards that, that's awesome. If you don't, that's also awesome. I want you to have the motivation and the inspirations that are driven by you based on what's important to you. You don't have to adopt someone else's standards. You can think about who you want to be. What do you want to do? What do you want to have? And then just go work towards that. You don't need someone else's standards, right? That's my biggest gripe with fitness inspiration, is that it forces us into artificial standards, and it brings with it so much shame if we don't live up to somebody else's standards. I want you to live up to your standards. I want you to live up to things that are individually relevant to you. And that's what I got for you today. And look, I forgot to do it at the intro, but you know the rebel oath, right? We talk about rejecting extremes. A lot of fitness inspiration is based on extremes. Why do you have to be a double amputee doing an obstacle race? Why do you have to be a mother of 4 and have 6-pack abs? Right? The Rebel Oath talks about rejecting extremes. It also talks about energizing yourself with healthy habits. When we try to live up to somebody else's standards, when we feel all that shame and guilt that we're not somebody else, when we're just trying to be ourselves, it's not energizing. That holds us back. That cuts us down. The Rebel Oath talks about break free from common standards. Heck, it's right here back behind me on this wall if you're watching the video podcast. Break free from common standards, and it's super common on social media to have this shame-based inspiration, but we don't need it. We also need to be excited about our potential. We can't do that with shame-based fitness inspiration. And then finally, love yourself and act accordingly. That's the 5-part Rebel Oath. And when we find that inspiration and that aspiration that's personally relevant to us, whatever that is for you, every day you work towards it, that's an act of loving yourself. So that's what I got. That's my biggest gripe with fitness inspiration. That's the Rebel Oath. That's how we should really go for motivation. We don't need to be motivated. We don't have to be inspired. We just have to be reminded of what's important to us and then work towards that. Look, if this was an eye-opener, if this gave you permission to seek out different sources of inspiration and fitness, if this gave you permission to define what fitness means for you, maybe it is 6-packs, maybe it's not 6-pack abs, maybe it's hiking distance, maybe it's not, maybe it's just being able to play with your kids with energy and excitement again. Whatever your standard is, if this gave you room to express that for yourself, can you do me a favor? Can you leave a little review on Apple or iTunes? And if you do, send me a screenshot of that review and I will send you a free high recipe protein book that gives you, did I say high recipe protein book? That doesn't make sense. No, it's not a high recipe protein book. Stop saying that, Steve. It is a high protein recipe book. Leave a review, send me a screenshot, and I will send you a completely befuddled title to some type of nutrition resource for free. My gift to you for leaving the review. And until I see you again tomorrow for another episode of the Health Rebels podcast, you know what to do, Rebel? Keep the oath.